We're creating about as many jobs as those other metros combined.
So Bend hates to be compared to Boulder.
We could have a whole hour conversation about this.
I think it sets us up another kind of foundation.
It's pretty forward-thinking, developments for an old busted-up sawmill town. These conversations are brought to you by the Ladd Group, Bend's leading real estate team. Help continue this BENDbeat conversation by subscribing, sharing, and leaving us a review. I'm here with Heidi Wright, who is the new publisher of the Bend Bulletin. I've had a couple great interviews recently, and every single one of them mentioned that I need to have you in here to have a conversation. They're all excited about the future, so I couldn't be more pleased you're here today.
Thank you. I'm pleased to be here.
Well, good. Well, this is an exciting time for Bend. A lot of great things have been happening, but one of the biggest things that happened recently was the EO Media's acquisition of the Bend Bulletin. Mm-hmm. And Bend Bulletin's been kind of on the edge for a couple of years, and there's a lot of business leaders in this town that are very excited about the future role, and I would just like to unpack that a little bit here today.
Okay.
But before we get to that, I'd like to learn a little bit more about you. What's your history? How did you end up in Bend? You've been here before, right?
Yes.
And you've been in the whole kind of Central Oregon or Oregon for a while now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd love to hear kind of your origin story and why we're sitting, here together today.
Okay. Well, I did come to Oregon in 2004.
Okay.
I was with the newspaper with Lee Enterprises, which is a publicly traded company in Montana. And when Pioneer News Group, who owns Klamath Falls, approached me, or I knew the CEO of the company, we began a conversation about the possibility of coming to Klamath Falls and working in their Oregon property, their only Oregon property, as a part equity owner, and being able to work for a privately held family company in newspapers. And I thought that sounded very attractive. So I moved from Montana to Klamath Falls in 2004 and was with them for 10 years as president and publisher of Klamath Publishing, which owned the Herald News, and then small little paper out in Lakeview, Lake County Examiner.
Okay.
And a few other, shopper products, things that newspapers own.
Yeah.
So, and then in 2014, I knew Gordon Black from just being involved in our industry in the state. I was on the Oregon Newspaper Publishers Association board and then served through the chairs of that organization. So you get to know a lot of the other folks around the state in our industry. Got to know Gordon, and then when the opportunity came up with his CFO retiring in 2014, sorry.
Okay.
I came on board actually 5 years ago, yesterday, November 4th. So I started at the Bulletin 5 years ago, and my first day on the job, I got out of the car, realized I didn't bring my boots with me, and there's about 9 inches of snow on the ground. So I took a picture of my foot and of my my high heel in the snow sent it to my husband and said, "Bring my boots, please, this weekend, and my winter coat."
Yeah.
Because that was my first day on the job in Bend 5 years ago. And then the opportunity opened up with EO Media Group about 2.5 years later to be their chief operating officer, coming back into a family-held company in the lead role, because the CEO of the company was retired. Still my boss, the CEO of EO Media Group, is Steve Forrester. So we're family members. And so anyway, I went to Salem and went to work in their corporate offices, and as it turned out, then ended up now back in Bend.
Are you excited to be here?
I'm very excited to be here. Very excited for this opportunity, and overwhelmed with the community support.
Well, yeah. What's exciting is with all these business leaders and community leaders that I'm talking to, every single one of them have mentioned how excited they are for the Bulletin and where it's going. Bend Bulletin started in 1905, something like that, or?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, so we're well over 100 years now.
Which most newspapers are. I mean, that is not uncommon. That is the backbone of the society for, being the voice for a community. So it's newspapers, and most of them in the country are over 100 years old.
Well, it's good to see that it's going forward as well, because over the last number of years, with some of the reports that I was reading on the Bulletin, it was troubled, right? Mm-hmm. And to have you guys step in, and more importantly, to have a local company that understands mm-hmm. Oregon and Bend is, I think, the ultimate solution, right?
Yeah, I think that was one of the most important things that we were hearing from the community members when we started talking to people about, well, first of all, our company started talking internally with our board, with our family members who I work for. The first question was, can we do this? Yeah. And then the second question is, should we do this? And in answering that second question, talking to the community members here and seeing how passionate they were about the Bulletin and about keeping an Oregon-based structure to the newspaper rather than it being an out-of-state. And they trusted us from the standpoint that we weren't going to do what the venture capitalists are doing with other newspapers in the country, and trying to monetize it as quickly as possible. I think our strategy, my strategy, is we need to evolve, not retreat. And the retreat is what's going on in the industry right now. Retreating. Of course, we got to cut costs. We got to do things smarter, but not at the expense of taking reporters off the streets or building up our advertising revenue, because that's what's going to take to make a sustainable model. You've got to have both. You've got to have the reporting and the ability to interact and connect with the community, and then we've got to be effective at delivering eyeballs to our advertisers.
Brian Ladd here. I hope you're enjoying the conversation and find this dialogue relevant to really what it means to live and work and play in this amazing community. As Ben's leading real estate team, we take our role seriously in representing both buyers and sellers at the absolute highest standards of our industry. For more information on how we can help, feel free to visit our website at benpropertysource.com or text LADD1, LADD1 to 88,000. What do you see the role of the Bulletin for the community? How would you define your primary purpose?
Well, I think we need to be a mirror.
A mirror, okay.
Of the community. We need, and that's not a unique phrase that I've come up with. I heard that recently, and I thought it makes a lot of sense. So we have to hold a mirror up to the community, and that means we're not the chamber newsletter. We will report the news. We have to be. My mantra is we have to be credible, we have to be relevant, and we have to reflect our community. If we do that, if we do those three things well, we will serve our advertisers well, we will serve our owners well, and we'll have a sustainable business model. Yeah. So I think that's, and what I heard loud and clear when I came back and was talking to the investors and citizens and readers is that we need to be connected into the community. We need to not be the Bulletin, which was a phrase I heard more than once. Yeah. And we need to get out and reach out into the community. And I think we're doing that. I'm getting good feedback that people feel like we are getting involved. Yeah. And we're learning what's going on. We're, as Catherine Brown, one of our owners of the company, said to me, because there was a lot of question, are we going to be a left-leaning liberal paper? Are we going to be conservative? There was some view that the Bulletin was somewhat more conservative than maybe reflective of the community, and that's back to we need to reflect the community. Well, and Catherine's response to that was, I'd rather not lean left or lean right. I'd rather lean in the center and with both of my ears open. And I think that is definitely a path for our company going forward, and that's what the community will be best served with, I think.
Can you take that nationwide, please?
I wish. Yeah, I think we're becoming so polarized in the country. It's disturbing that, in particular, when media is being considered an enemy. And some media, left and right, is feeding into that.
Well, they're using it. There's an agenda behind the media.
It's a weapon.
Yeah.
And we should never journalism should never be a weapon.
Yeah. Well, and what you're referring to about probably some of the sentiments that people have had about the Bulletin in the past was that sometimes it did have a bit of an agenda, and it didn't feel like it was appreciative of a little bit of all the great things that were truly happening in this town. And I think you're right. It doesn't need an agenda. There's an amazing storyline here. There's hundreds of nonprofits doing amazing things. There's hardworking city planners trying to do things that frankly aren't being done well anywhere, and we're doing a pretty darn good job at them. And there's citizens planning, 30 years in the future with the 2050 plan. And so, I mean, it seems like the subject matter, if you're just a mirror, is a pretty dynamic and interesting one at that.
It is. And, we need to be the mirror, but we also need to take a leadership role as well.
Yeah.
And offer our opinions. Our opinion page is an opinion page.
Yep.
It doesn't color the rest of the coverage in the paper. Some people may feel that that's not possible. I think newspapers create a little bit of an odd dynamic for themselves, if they do choose to step up in a leadership role, especially with political endorsements.
Yeah.
Whether it's right or wrong, it creates some potential discourse with the rest of the content in the paper that's unintended.
Yep.
So we just have to be aware of that. But again, it's more it's more of trying to reflect the community and most importantly, be credible.
Yeah.
And we don't always get it right, and we don't want to be, we want to be able to correct mistakes if we made a reporting error. You know, I think one of the things we're more open with the community right now, and I give a lot of credit to the editor who we've brought on board, Jerry O'Brien.
Okay.
He has that right tone. He has that right balance.
Yeah.
We will do our job as journalists, and we aren't for sale. Our content is not for sale, and not everything that happens in Bend, Oregon or Central Oregon is going to be chamber news that you're going to want the rest of the world to hear about, but it is part of our responsibilities. So, we have to be credible, but we also have to be a part of the community, not aside from the community.
Yeah.
Observing it.
Well, those are all great things. When did Jerry start the role as the new editor?
Well, I asked him to consider it about an hour after we were the successful bidders out of the bankruptcy auction on July 29th. And so I believe he started mid-September. If I remember correctly, I should know that immediately, mid to end of September.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's been noticeable. I mean,
Yes.
Even as a reader, I've noticed that the level of the discourse and the sophistication of the discourse in the paper over the last few months has been refreshingly high and professional. And it's been interesting. And what I also really enjoy is, and we should talk about this, it being owned by EO Media, which already has all these other journalists all across the state. What I'm seeing is a lot more Oregon statewide content that, we're not just a bubble. We're out here kind of in the middle of nowhere in Central Oregon, but what I feel more connected to the rest of the state over the last few months than I have in a long time.
That is great to hear, because that is exactly the experience we want you to have.
Okay.
So yes, Bend, we need to report on Bend, but the fact is there is more to this state than Bend or Central Oregon. And we are in a unique position to do that, especially with the ag community. And I think that's an important, topic, agriculture, that needs to be shared throughout the state, and we have started doing that as well. So that is one of the keys to our strategy as a company. We're getting all of our editors together next week, actually, for the first time, to talk about, in particular, sharing content across the state. The other thing you may notice is we've entered a sharing agreement with OPB, so they have a lot of reporting horsepower in the state too, and that is part of the model, is partnerships and sharing content. So yes, you will see a lot more of our Eastern Oregon coverage. And, we've moved up. Jerry's already started changing up the format of the paper. You may notice now page 2 and page 3 either have more local news. The front page always has local news, quite a bit of it. I'd say at least 4 stories a day is our target. And then the page 2 and page 3, we've moved a lot of that state coverage that you referenced up there, and that may be coverage that we've produced in one of our 14 newspapers in the region, or it might be something that Oregon Public Broadcasting's produced, or it might be something that we picked up through a sharing service with one of the other papers in the region. But that's our goal: is what do the readers here want to know about? And Steve Forrester, our CEO, and obviously one of our owners, has said his goal is for the Bulletin and Central Oregon to be a beacon, and this is a game-changing acquisition for our company because we don't own any other daily newspapers.
Okay.
So this is more than double the size of our company in one fell swoop.
Yeah.
And so we see that putting a lot of resource and time and focus into growing the Bulletin will also be shared out to the rest of the state as well. So we see this more as a beacon for the rest of our company and for the rest of the readers in the state. So you're seeing content coming in. Those readers out there are seeing content coming into them out of here as well. So,
well, it feels like a really good size for what you're trying to do.
It is. And then, our big publication besides the Bulletin now is Capital Press, which is our ag-based publication, and that is very focused on agriculture in the Northwest. Well, in the region, actually, we cover California as well. So that's been an important piece to this as well. So besides geographically, we also can dig deep in that particular area as far as the economy. So
it seems like agriculture is probably it hasn't been leading in the headlines, and there's a lot of amazing job growth that's happened in the area, but you're right. I mean, their voice has not been heard through this, especially as Ben specifically has redeveloped into what it is today. And that'll be interesting to see that re-elevated.
It is interesting when we were looking at just who our readers are of Capital Press. Of course, we've broken it down by zip code, and now owning the Bulletin, we're looking at strategies, to where how do we make sense of this for ad buys and other factors for Central Oregon. So it caused me to look at, how many Capital Press subscribers do we have in Central Oregon? And we have actually 4,200 Capital Press subscribers in this area. So we do have an audience that's already seeing the full meal deal with all of our ag content, but we do find a way that we're going to be able to share that back into our other newspapers, that maybe the non-ag readers get a little more exposure to the ag world. And we've also developed a magazine that we're excited about called The Other Oregon. It's a voice for rural Oregon targeted to urban decision makers. And so we bring that out once a quarter, and it's mailed free to 5,000 people that we've determined are urban decision makers that could probably benefit from understanding more about rural Oregon. So
incredible.
Not quite sure how we're going to mix that all in with Ben, because as we were talking early on, Catherine Brown asked me, she said, well, does Ben consider itself rural? I said, no, I don't think so. Well, is it urban? So, that's a good question. What do you think? How would you define Bend? Is it rural or urban or?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure how to answer that. I mean, we are very urban in a rural environment. And I think I wish I could come up with a better answer on that, but I think it goes back to the Oregon land use laws, right? And those laws that were put into place in the early 70s, which were pretty forward thinking. And the reason we're not a sprawling Western town with endless congestion, low density subdivisions, and lack of connectivity and non-diverse job base had to do with these land use laws, which puts these urban growth boundaries around all of our cities. And they want a very defined, definitive interface between urban and rural. And I think that's what I love so much about this area is that, if I go up to Montana or if I go to Wyoming or I go to Idaho, you start knowing when you approach these towns 15 miles out. It's, all the counties have approved all this low density sprawl. They can't possibly provide infrastructure for it. So there's endless, some paved roads, some dirt roads, some have overhead power, some have underground. A lot of them are on their own private little utilities. And it's just this endless sprawl as you come into the town. But yet their population is no higher than ours. What's interesting here is that, to grow, I think the last urban growth boundary expansion of Bend took 15 years to get passed. And
finally did in 2016.
Yeah, I believe 2016.
Right.
And they had to go back to the state. They were remanded by the state a couple times to revise that plan. And what's interesting is that we live in this little world here where in a couple square miles, we have this dense, somewhat urban lifestyle where we now have a 4-year university. We have endless amounts of restaurants. We have, all these parks and fine dining and food cart lots and schools and magnet schools and all this. And then we hit a hard boundary and we have 2.5 million acres of Forest Service out our back door. And
which is another attraction.
Yeah, which is incredible. And I think that I would love to be able to come up with a term to describe that. But it's pretty unique. I haven't found that in many other towns where it's this hard, and granted, there are some challenges with that. When you create these urban growth boundaries, it doesn't allow endless housing, and then you have more affordable housing issues. And
which is a big issue. And then you get into the fights on infill.
Yep.
And
not in my backyard.
Yeah, rezoning. And I know the casitas were a hot topic when I was here before, and I think they probably still are a hot topic.
Yeah.
So how do you make that work? How do you make us not become another Portland?
Correct.
That is so unaffordable, which is just a microcosm of what's going on in the Bay Area and Seattle.
Yeah.
So I got to tell you, it's been a struggle for us. We try to hire people, and the wages you have to hire at for somebody to move here and find a house and settle down, have a family, it doesn't mesh.
Yeah.
We've made 2 job offers in the last week that people accepted and then turned down because they couldn't find housing.
Couldn't find a house.
Yeah. So I've told my management team, frankly, first questions out if you're doing a phone interview is, well, ideally, are you relocating to Bend anyway?
Yeah.
Because that's what's turned out. We've got 2 people coming in because they're a trailing spouse.
Yeah.
And their spouse got a job here.
Yeah.
And so we're able to hire the trailing spouse. And that's about the only way, I think, unless you've got somebody that wants to live in an apartment, doesn't have a family. Yep. That might be tough too.
Yeah.
It's overwhelming.
Yeah.
As an employer, it's very difficult. And, we employ people across the spectrum. We have 4-year degreed journalists and highly skilled sales staff and digital team, and on that end. And then we also we hire, we have office workers, we have people who work for us in our mailroom facility putting the paper together at night, to highly skilled pressmen, so we run the whole gamut as far as the employment spectrum, and I think we're probably just representative of what most businesses in town deal with.
Yep.
Good luck trying to get people to come from the outside. They want to live here. They love it. Yeah. They want to go skiing in the wintertime. They want to go mountain biking. They want to live this lifestyle, but they can't afford it.
Yeah. Well, and that's going to be one of the cruxes, I think, that we as a town need to solve. And a lot of towns do, kind of placate to that and say they're picking around the edges, or they're fixing affordable housing, but they're really picking around the edges. I think we're going to need to face that head on, because for the last 3 years, we were named by the Milken Institute as the #1 job growth small metro area in the U.S.
Yes.
And with that type of growth, you need all the other things that come with that: housing, primarily
Childcare.
housing,
Childcare.
new schools. I think Bend stands at we've opened a new school every single year for the last 20 years,
which is amazing.
I mean, how many towns can say that they've opened a
don't.
brand new school every year for the last 20 years? I mean, it's insane, and we're still oversubscribed, right? And so I think that's going to need to be something that we continually pick away at, or face head on. Otherwise, it's going to impede our growth into the future.
Yeah, we better be talking about it. And
Yep.
that's why I'm excited about the BEND 2030, now
Yep.
BEND 2050.
Yeah.
And they're it's not just that; it's the whole
Yeah.
community talking about the future. And one of the first groups I met when I came here was the Looking Forward group.
Yeah.
And what I was impressed by with them is it wasn't just a lot of the newcomers, the tech people, and it wasn't all the old timers who have been here forever and
Yeah.
want to try to control the future.
Yeah.
Maybe are in angst about how things look to them.
Yeah.
It's those groups together, people talking together that in other communities might not be talking together. They might be, but
Yeah.
probably they're not. Probably they're not making the effort to
Yeah.
come together and come up with ideas and conversation, because I think that's one of the things in our country that we could do a whole lot more of and be a lot further ahead, is just have more civil discourse
Yep.
and more conversation about the issues, instead of becoming in our own echo chambers. We are as a society, I think, and in towns, when you're trying to plan the future of a town, you can get into your own echo chamber.
Absolutely.
With everybody that thinks like you, and you don't want to get outside of that and be challenged or challenge others. And that's one of the unique things I see with BEND. I don't mean it's all just wonderful and everybody gets along great and they're able to have robust conversations. Of course not, but I do see more of that
Yeah.
capability here than you would think a town this size would be able to do.
Well, in all the conversations that I've had, collaboration has naturally floated into the conversation without me forcing it in any way. And I think collaboration is getting to the heart of what you're talking about, because BEND is going to continue to grow. Yeah. We have an incredible amount of natural resources. It's beautiful. We now have one of the most diverse job bases in a 100,000 person town anywhere in the U.S., probably anywhere in the world.
Which might help with the next recession.
Yes, I'm really excited about that. I was talking to Roger Lee, and we were very heavily dependent on tourism and construction prior to the last, during the last run up, early 2000s, and when the economy took a hit, we tumbled. And but it's a very different world we're in now. The amount of jobs that they've created in over 50 different sectors in this town is noteworthy. And now the tables have turned, and they're trying to get Roger Lee and all the people from BEND to go around the U.S. to teach other towns how to create a diverse economy. And I'm hoping that that'll help create some resistance to any economic challenges that we face. And I think it's also going to play into a lot of different things. I think last time when it hit that hard, and there was a lot of people, especially in the lower rungs of the income ladder, that were dramatically affected. And hopefully we can help provide some resistance, or some security in the next downturn. And I think we're there, but we'll the proof's going to be in the future here.
I think those lower income earners are going to get hit harder than anybody, regardless of how diverse the economy is.
Sure.
But if you can mitigate it some, that's, I think that's the best path forward, is try to mitigate the impacts of a recession. I've lived through that a couple of times.
Yeah.
And it is devastating to a community, and what's devastating to the affluent community is it's tragic for the the other side of that, the lower income earners, they really feel it.
Well, they feel it, and then the town feels it too, because it doesn't, just when the economy comes back, those wounds are not healed overnight. Because one of the challenges that I hear from builders and developers in our town is, I would love to be able to do more affordable housing, but we don't have enough labor here to do it. And when I studied it, is what I saw is that during the last recession, there weren't enough jobs to keep people here.
Right.
So
And so they
everyone left.
Well, the trades.
The trades
The
left.
trades all left.
And when the
Good luck
trades
getting them
leave,
back.
you can't get them back.
You can't get them back.
Exactly. It took us 20, 30 years to develop that trade pool. And now we have this demand for housing that we can't keep up with. So what it's doing is it's driving prices up even further. And so that, that speaks to what you were just talking about.
Right. So you better have a more diverse economy, like you said, so you don't take such a dive when a recession hits, so you can keep the trades going.
Yeah.
And not be, but then on the other side of it, why Bend felt that recession so hard was because its main industry was the real estate.
Sure.
And that, so it's kind of a vicious cycle. But you talk about the trades and what happens when that falls apart, and the relationships that go away, the workers that go away. It makes me think about, what we're feeling right now with the trade wars that are going on especially like for our Capital Press publication, the trade wars are affecting the folks who rely on the agricultural world. And when those trade relationships get broke and those trading partners move to other countries for their commodities, good luck. It's the same thing. Good luck getting them back.
Yeah.
You've closed those doors, much like we closed the doors here when all of the workers, the skilled workers that can provide the trade for the, building out the economy, when they leave, you aren't going to get them back. And that's the same thing that's happening, I think, on the world stage with our ag situation.
Yeah.
We see it in the ag side, because we see the equipment dealers who, are hesitant, and the farmers are hesitant to buy the equipment because they don't know if they're going to be able to sell their crops. And so the equipment dealers aren't sure, what they should be doing for marketing their products.
Yep.
And so it has a spiral effect, much like what happened here with the trade workers leaving.
Well, I think this gets to the very heart of why the Bulletin's so important for our community. Because if you can, because you're the beacon, you're the light for telling these stories and bringing everyone around the table to have these discussions. And I think that's going to, help us avoid some of this in the future. I mean, even what you're talking about of bridging the kind of our urban bend with the agricultural world of, our surroundings, I think can go a long ways. And if people if they have a voice in the conversation, they're going to feel like they're going to be part of the solution as well.
Right, exactly. Well, I wouldn't presume that we would be, at the head of the table, certainly, but we should be at the table, helping facilitate those conversations and helping interpret, for a readership, because we do have a large audience in the community, and we also have some reach, like into the state capitol. We've got a real strong partnership there where we do staff a Capitol Bureau reporting team in partnership with Pamplin Media and the Salem reporters. So, I think on all of those fronts, we shouldn't be at the head of the table. We never would presume to be at the head of the table. That's not our role, but we certainly should be at the table helping facilitate that conversation.
Well, yeah, this speaks to the collaboration because, in conversations I had with Roger Lee, he said the same thing. He goes, we're at the table, but we're never alone. He said, when we go to recruit airlines to come in to give us additional air service, we have the county, we have the city, we have the Chamber of Commerce, and we all go collectively in as a team and we make stuff happen. And no one has to carry the load by themselves. Right. And, Jim Shell also talked about that. He was going around to different cities studying what makes Bend different, different, better, worse than all these other similar sized towns. And his big takeaway is other towns are not collaborative like we are. He went to Boulder, and he said that there's a hard line. The business world does not talk to the government. The government does not talk to the business world, and they just put up with each other, and they're on parallel tracks, operating in their own universes. And they're not coming together to solve affordable housing. They're not coming together to help plan for the future. And, it's created a model where we have our affordable housing issues. But if you look at Boulder, I think the average price is $800,000 or $900,000. And it's a true drive-in city now, where anyone who has a service job doesn't even stand a chance of actually living there.
Right.
And that's what I'm hoping, I'm optimistic about, because the conversations that I'm hearing are all that this is not what we want our future to be. And it seems like we're on a track that I hopefully will be able to avoid that. And nothing's going to be perfect. Right. Obviously, we have homeless shelters and we have all kinds of issues here as well. But the conversation's being had, right? You
have to shine a light on it, or you're not going to come up with the solutions.
And
that's where the paper, I think, can serve an important role.
Yeah.
And, that's where we want to be at the table, is to help shine a light, not to create angst for the community, but to be real and be credible about what the future looks like, and also talk about the successes, though, too. And I think this community does come together more than others. And I think about another community that I hear Bend compared to, and that's Bozeman, Montana. And I do have some familiarity with Bozeman because I was the publisher in Butte, and then we also had a shopper publication that was based out of Bozeman. And I don't see Bend and Bozeman as the same communities. I don't see the similarities, other than they both attract a lot of tourists, and they both have great skiing. My son grew up skiing at Big Sky, but it's because of what you're talking about. I think Bend has a more, I guess I would call it, fierce pride.
Yes.
And it's there's a lot of difference, I think, between the communities. Bozeman is a university town with a university with a town around it.
Correct. Yeah.
And we are a town that has a university growing up in it. And just practically too, I think for Bend, one of the things that's good for our economy, it's kind of a duh, is the skiing is up at Mount Bachelor, but people have to come back here to stay over.
I love that about this town.
It is and that's something that Bozeman and all of these other, kind of resort type communities that attract tourists don't have, is that, the main attraction, at least in the wintertime, is that mountain, which is fantastic, but you can't stay up there. You got to come back here to sleep and eat, and you've got your evenings and you've got your weekends that you've got your family members that maybe don't go skiing or go mountain biking or whatever activity you want to do on all that land that's out there around us. That's fantastic to utilize, but you've got to come back here, or Sun River. But you've got a community that people are going to experience that other places like Bozeman, they don't have to experience Bozeman in order to experience Bridger or Big Sky. They can go be there and live in that world and then fly back out of Bozeman. So I think we've got a very unique opportunity here to be very attractive. And of course, the Portland crowd is close enough that you don't ever want to try to be heading over here on a Friday night, which I've done a few times, and it's like, I'm not doing that again. And then try heading back on Sunday afternoon. Good luck.
We're starting to see some traffic on those.
Oh yeah. So
I think one of the main differentiators for Bend is how intentional it is. Mm-hmm. The town didn't grow up just because someone randomly, the state said, oh, you have a university. Mm-hmm. We fought long and hard to have the university come here. And not only did we find a place for it, we raised money to make it happen. Now all the local businesses are getting involved in helping build the curriculum. Mm-hmm. It's not by accident. And Bend didn't accidentally go from a sawmill town to what it is today. a lot of smart minds dragging it into the future. And that's perhaps what I'm most excited about. And Roger Lee kind of talked about the transition of the resort communities like Sun River and Pronghorn and all the Brasada were created by the state to expose Central Oregon and expose these areas to outsiders. And that's how they kind of that was their portal for discovery into these areas. Right. And then it went from tourism, and then they used tourism to develop the job base that we have now. And then we're trying to figure out what's our future. And that's why we're creating universities and health centers and all that. But it seems like a very different path than, I have family, and my sister is a veterinarian doctor in Bozeman, and my brother lives in Big Sky, and I have a heart, I love that area. But when you go around those towns, there's not a clear path forward.
No. And I don't see the collaboration. The other thing I don't see that I see here when I look at a community, and it's probably hard to define this, but it's obviously that fierce pride in, we're isolated. So Bend is an isolated community. That has its good points and its bad points. I think that's frustrating from a lot of standpoint of trying to be able to communicate to Salem and to the Portland market.
Sure.
Which, our company has a lot of experience with the rural side of Oregon. Now whatever Bend is, the rural urban, we got to find a new word for it. But, we're an island. We're isolated, but that, I've heard some people say, well, that's not a bad thing because we're very intentional. Yeah. But we have a fierce pride, and I think that is, and we have a soul. I think that's the other thing that a lot of communities like Bozeman wouldn't be able to say that they have. I think about Butte, Montana, and I would say it has a soul. Yeah. It has more of a. They're not going to stay down. They've gotten kicked a lot over the last 150 years. That community has, and have really caught very few breaks. Basically, it was a rough and tumble mining community. But by God, you know people who are from Butte. Yeah. Because they are proud. Yeah. And they will defend their community, and they will do whatever it takes to help Butte grow. Yeah. So when I was at the newspaper there, we put a bumper sticker together because the rest of the state was so fond of looking down their nose at us, kind of like, maybe Portland does a little bit, looking down at, obviously, Klamath Falls, where it was for 10 years. But we put a bumper sticker together in Butte that said Butte and proud of it. Yeah. It was sponsored by the newspaper, and that really spoke to what the soul of that community was. It was more of a kind of a back alley fighting Irish town sort of thing. Bend isn't that, but Bend has a soul. And that's where I think we have one leg up over the other growth communities that you might compare us to, like Boulder and Bozeman.
So a fierce pride and soul. I love those. I had never heard those attributed to Ben, but they make sense. Mm-hmm. I think we need a bumper sticker.
I can make that happen.
But I think that it really speaks to where we're going. And what I'm also trying to do with this podcast is to help people understand what it means to be a Bend citizen.
Right. That's what I was just thinking about too, when you just reflected that, fierce pride and a soul. And I think that's part of the angst that's out there is that we don't want to lose that.
Yeah. How do we not lose that as we become a 150,000 person town? Yeah, because
we attract all these people here because we got them to come, the grand plan to get them to come experience and then, come live here. Well, of course, people, they do. That's how they end up here. They come and experience it as a visitor and a tourist, and all of that marketing worked really well to get them here. Now they've come here. Okay, now what do we do with them? Yep. Yeah. And what do we do with them when they're tourists here? Like Bill Smith said, be nice. Yeah. And then the bumper stickers, be nice. It's Bend.
Well, I love that philosophy of the be nice bumper sticker as opposed to Bend sucks, don't move here, tongue in cheek.
Yeah.
It's tongue in cheek. I don't think it reflects the tone of the town.
No.
And that's where I think we're at a critical juncture where we need to remain optimistic. This town was built on optimists and people that were problem solvers. And I think we're at this critical junction where I'm afraid some of the new people in town are looking at it as a snapshot in time. They come here and they look at pretty Bend that has all the parks in place, has all the schools in place, and they don't want to see change. They don't want an extra car behind them or in front of them at the roundabout. They don't want any change from here out. And I think this gets to the heart of kind of what I'm trying to move forward in this discussion of change is inevitable. And we can't be afraid of it, and we can't begrudge it, because if we try to freeze Bend for what it is now, I'm afraid that we'll die. There's a lot of towns in Oregon that are beautiful and have natural resources and rivers and mountains and all the things that we have, but yet the economy's bad. People have to leave to go find education. People have to leave to find jobs, and the towns
and you've got your government and your business running on separate tracks.
Yeah, and people are running for the hills, and I think that for us to take this for granted would be an absolute waste. I think it would be a tragedy for us to take it for granted, and I think that it's somehow of, hey, be grateful for all that's been done, and if there's problems, be a proactive part of the solution, rather than putting a sarcastic bumper sticker on your car and getting mad every time someone moves from California to here,
Because you just moved from California 2 years
Sure.
ago.
Yeah.
But do you think it's?
Well, I didn't, but
but do you think it's those people who are saying, stop, don't move here?
Yeah,
Do you?
it is. What I'm finding, and the people that have been here for generations are pretty appreciative for the growth. The only divide that I sense is kind of what you talked about, the agriculture community. I don't think they've had a voice.
No,
but
I don't think they have
when I meet people that are truly Bend citizens that have been here for 2, 3, 4 generations, unanimously, in my opinion, they are grateful for what's happened. They said there were times in the 70s and 80s and 90s when sawmills were shutting down and I was losing my family. My kids were going to Portland for jobs or going out of state for to go to university, and they never came back.
Right.
And I've made a good living. I was able to raise my family here, and now my grandchildren are coming here, and what I'm finding is that the people that have witnessed the full kind of evolutionary cycle of how to get here are appreciative. What I'm finding is that there's a couple year period where people come and enjoy it. And it's I don't know, it's like 3 to 10 years where they've been here just long enough where they've seen change, where they've seen a little more traffic, they've seen a little bit more problems, and they're saying time out, no more.
Right.
I come from a family development background, so I'm particularly attuned to it, but kind of the not in my backyard, the NIMBY mentality, that's what I'm most afraid of. This town opened its doors to me. It opened its doors to you. And who are we to say that the door is shut?
Yeah.
Right?
No, that's true.
So, I don't know. I'm just feeling, I don't want to go off on a tangent there, but I think we're at a critical junction where we need to, remain open to change, as scary as it is, right?
Well, we need maybe to step back, and like you say, you've got the folks who have been here forever, and they see the broader picture, because they had the experience. But the ones that have had a shorter experience, they don't know what's ahead of them. They don't know what this is going to look like in 20 years. So there is a lack of information, and there's a lack of maybe vision of how Bend is, of their understanding of how Bend is going to grow deliberately. And trust. I think it's kind of, you talked about collaboration earlier, as kind of summarizing my yammering about stuff. You said, well, yeah, that's collaboration. Well, yeah, it is. It's collaboration and it's trust. You've got to build the trust. And what can we do to help build the trust? with those 3 to 10 year residents
Yep.
that can see that broader view. And I think that's where I applaud things like Bend 2050, Bend
Absolutely.
2030. If they can see that, okay, you do have a plan.
Yeah.
This isn't just the urban sprawl of, of all the other communities like you talked about with
Yep.
land use. No, there is a plan. Is it going to all work out? Probably not.
Yep.
But will we get more roundabouts built? Which just annoyed the heck out of me my first few times coming to Bend. It was like, especially roundabouts where they changed the street name on
Yes.
the other side of it.
Yeah,
And it's
well.
like, seriously? But
I
anyway,
agree.
God, talk about going
Yeah.
off on tangents.
Yeah.
And I got to say, the drivers here are, for as friendly as Bend is and everything, I got to say the drivers are not that friendly sometimes. I've got more honking horns and middle fingers. And I don't drive slow.
Oh
So
man,
it's just it's a really
it's rough to
odd,
hear.
odd thing. It's so counterintuitive what you would expect in Bend, because Bend is a place people should be nice in, and people generally are nice. But I don't know. There's some madness that happens. Maybe it's the air or something when they get behind the wheel. Oh, that's such an awful subject.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely fine. And, and I feel it too. And it's so easy for me to say, oh, everybody get with the program, but I see the challenges. I work with people that are trying to hire people for the story you tell, you can't get people to move here. Or I meet people that are struggling to buy a house and they can't buy it. And there's not enough rental housing. And so I see those pain points. I understand why people are frustrated. But unfortunately, there are a lot of towns in Oregon that aren't growing, and it's frankly no easier to live there.
No, it
and
isn't.
so I think the element of creating that trusted dialogue that you're talking about with the Bulletin, I think it's so critical in helping us continue to move forward without becoming partisan about our pretty little town here.
Right. Or just so focused on ourselves, we're not looking at what else is going on in the world.
Yep.
So
well, and I think that's key, that we need to continue to try on other people's hats.
Yeah.
When there was a contingent of people in Broken Top that were fighting the location of Oregon State University, you have to understand their perspective. They're, a lot of them are retired. They thought they were moving into a quiet West Side area that
they were,
and they don't want it to change. So I understand where they're coming from, but for the holistic plan for this town, to have a university as part of it, I think is hypercritical, and to have it in the heart of the town as opposed to on the edge, so that you can integrate those students and professors and education and businesses all together. But it's not easy, right?
No, it's not, because it is going to change people's lives. And so for us as the newspaper for the community, the one thing we're charged with that I hope we do a darn good job at is information, because when there's a lack of information, what fills that void? The anger, not in my backyard. I don't understand why you need to do this. And then they go off into their own echo chambers and just feed off of that. Well, we're not going to solve, as the newspaper, we're not going to solve all those problems. But if we can provide a trusted information source for people to read, that we are going to look at both sides of an issue, and we're not going to be promoting per se. We're going to be reporting and trying to find all sides of the issue. That's what we can serve to the community, and I think that's what's going to help us survive and become sustainable business. The newspaper itself, if you followed the bankruptcy at all, wasn't in jeopardy. It wasn't in severe financial trouble outside of taking care of that building. That building.
The palace.
The cost of that, I don't like the image of it. But it is what it is. But if you peel all of that away, which you peel all the debt that was associated with trying to feed that monster of a palace.
Yeah.
The newspaper itself is financially sound, and I think we will be able to continue to serve the community, hire the journalists. We have more journalists working for us, and more folks helping our advertisers reach eyeballs than pretty much anybody else in the market. And so, that's where our future is. And, I hope we get to help facilitate those conversations for the community, such as, some of the big issues that have recently been a part of the community conversation.
Yeah.
And the ones that are going to come.
Well, hey, the town is extremely grateful that you're here, that EO Media is doing what you're doing. I think the plan that you have in place is incredible, and I think with that, I'm sure you feel a lot of weight of the community's vision on your shoulders. But what's encouraging is the town's behind you, right?
Yes.
Even in the acquisition of the Bulletin, didn't we have quite a few community leaders step up and say, "Hey, let's make this happen," and they stepped in as investors?
Yes, they did.
Yeah.
After we got past the point inside of our company of can we, as I had mentioned earlier, then should we?
Yeah.
Part of the can we is, financially it would have been a lot more risk than we would have been willing to take to finance this, on our own.
Yeah.
And frankly, there were people from the community reaching out to us and saying, as Bill Smith said to me, what I wanted to try to figure out is who was going to ride this horse out of the swamp, and so, and they saw our company and they saw that, we have been in business for 113 years now. So we're fourth generation, family held. We know Oregon. This makes a lot of sense for us just as far as a footprint in Oregon. And we had community members who cared deeply about this newspaper not going to Rhode Island Suburban Newspaper Group.
It would have changed the town.
It would have changed. I don't know if it would have changed the town necessarily. It would have changed the ability of the town to tell its story.
Yeah, to have an honest conversation.
Yeah, right, because there would have been a lot less people available to hold those mirrors up, or, as I mentioned earlier, and to be able to, frankly, have an advertising base.
Yeah.
It also would create a sustainable business model. It's, you're either going to evolve or you're going to retreat. We are, as a lot of newspaper companies are, focusing much more on the digital platform. But and this isn't anything we've started here, it was already in the works before we got here, was building a real full-blown digital agency that, is a separate brand from the newspaper. The people that are employed to do this are not going to come in and try to pitch you a banner ad on our website on top of the print ad. They're talking about true digital marketing.
Yep. And I've started to work with them as recently. They're incredibly talented.
Yeah, they are incredibly talented. And I've got to say, a more talented crew than I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And bar none, as far as, we have a lot of interactions with agencies, of course, digital agencies and all types, full service agencies as an industry, in partnerships and stuff. And I got to say, what I'm seeing here is, not just, good salespeople, but good strategists. And also the other side of it is fulfillment. So we do all our own fulfillment for our campaigns. And so, we don't outsource all of that. We're going to keep that all in-house, separately branded name.
I love the fact that you're saying you're not outsourcing, you're fulfilling it here. And I went and met with your advertising department last week for some of my ads, and you open those doors and there's a lot of people under your roof.
There are.
So whether I wanted to say tongue-in-cheek call it a palace, I think it was forward-leaning, and the amount of people that you're employing there, here in Bend is incredible. I hope the town listens to this, because the clarity of vision that the Bulletin has and the support that the community came together to put it together with EO Media is is incredible. And I definitely don't want to take that for granted. So
we're so excited to be here.
Well, I appreciate you for pushing this forward, and don't let go of that print. When my
Absolutely not.
and in full Bend style is my dog's a street dog, was a street dog, but when my street dog runs out every morning and grabs the paper on the driveway, it's part of me living here. So don't let the print go away.
Oh no, I'm not in my lifetime, which I hope is somewhat long still. So no, we won't let the print go away. But that's so funny because I've heard so many people say their dog comes and gets their paper in the morning, and if it's not there, they don't know what to do.
Thanks for joining us. This is the BENDbeat, and until next time.